Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Dan.
This
Stone.
is Dexter from The
This
Offspring.
is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is David Labb.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick
I'm
Gillette.
Christopher
This is
Knopf.
Dr. Bob Greenberg.
I'm Laird Hamilton.
This is Julia A Maki, author, veteran of What They Don't Teach You in Deer River, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Hey Julia, it's great to have you on the show. It's always fun to have fellow veterans to exchange these notes. I guess a couple admin things. We both are big fans of what Eric Shaw is doing over at Tactical 16. He and Chris Schaefer are friends, and they've both been on the Break It Down show previously. And also we've had author Justin Jordan on the show, and that's so you're part of a growing cadre of people that are authors, that are veterans telling their story. And I think what's cool about this is, for the first time really ever, veterans are being encouraged to share their stories in real time. And you know, a lot of us have a couple of misconceptions about what reality is. One is that we're not supposed to tell our story. We're supposed to be quiet and just, you know, do the service and shut up about it. But that's really not the case. And the other thing is, a lot of us have this misconception of somehow each of us isn't a hero in our own right and able to say, this is what I did, and it was hard. Because even though your job and my job are almost polar opposites in terms of what we had to do, your work is just as significant as my work is, because we're all part of the same team, same mission, same thing. And once you raise your right hand and say, I swear to defend, you know, you're good. You're in the club. So, one, thank you for your service. And two, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, I agree. I love the work that they're doing at Tactical 16 and helping the authors and veterans tell their stories, where traditional routes may not be the right way, but this is a lot of therapeutic writing. I'm finding a lot of people are getting the help that they so deserve through this. And the guys that you mentioned, Chris Schaefer, Eric Shaw, Justin Jordan, they're awesome guys, and I've just enjoyed working with them so much and being a part of this publishing company and team, really. We call ourselves a Tactical 16 team, so. Yeah,
and we're Break It Down show. We're proud to be part of this team, too, and helping you guys create a platform to tell your story. Tell us a little bit about your book.
So my book, What They Don't Teach You in Deer River, starts on the day that I left for boot camp and chronicles through all my different experiences as a small town girl right off the farm in northern Deer River, Minnesota, which is a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. Most people haven't heard of it. Just under Canada, really.
Just a little north of Zemple, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, right next. You know where Zemple is?
I do, actually.
Seriously? Oh, I don't know anybody that knows Zemple. But yeah, we're right next to Zemple. That's funny.
I had a friend that was from Minnesota, and he used Zemple as his town, like Bone Gap, Illinois. And you're like, what the hell is even that? You know, so that was his sort of what the hell Minnesota. So that's why we know about it.
Yeah, I usually have to refer to Grand Rapids. We're about a half an hour from Grand Rapids, Minnesota, not Michigan. And half the time people don't even know where that is. So I'll be like, between Duluth and Bemidji, everybody knows Duluth. It's up there.
When I looked up Deer River, I was like, wait, I see Grand Rapids. What state am I talking about here? Am I North Dakota? Am I even in the right place? Yeah, so for sure, you guys are nowhere near anything. And even to say Grand Rapids, Minnesota, you still, what's the biggest big town close to you guys?
Well, it depends on your idea of a big town. Grand Rapids has about 8,000 people. To me, that's a big town.
Yeah.
Deer River, about 903, just got our first stoplight right before I left home, I should say, to join the Navy. So it's a pretty small town. The town where everybody knows everybody, everybody's in your business, but everybody really takes care of each other too. And so I wanted to kind of illustrate that a little bit in my book, because I didn't realize how unique it was. Number one, just the cold alone. Where we have to plug in our cars at night in the winter, or it will not start in the morning, as well as all the uniqueness, just the small town. You know, I would worry more about being attacked by a wolf walking down the street in the middle of the night versus a gang member or something like that, a bad guy. More wildlife than anything up there.
Yeah, wildlife and cold temperatures are your guys' predators for sure. So, a small town girl that decides to join, first off, the Navy. I mean, granted, there's a lot of water in Minnesota, but why the Navy? And then what was the moment where you're like, I think I'm going to do this? Yeah, I'm doing it. Tell us about that.
Well, I actually knew I wanted to do aviation, and that moment was when I was outside one day. I was probably in middle school age, and a bunch of fighter jets flew over our home and just like rumbled the whole area. You could just feel the power behind their engines, and I just was so enthralled by that. I'm like, wow, those are amazing. And they were headed over. It was Memorial Weekend, all the different cemeteries in the area to honor the veterans that had fallen. I was like, oh my goodness, I want to fly. I want to be a part of that. And so I did the whole thing in, my senior year, junior year, talking to all the different recruiters. And it's funny because the Air Force one didn't promise me flying like the Navy one did. They're like, oh, we have many more planes than the Air Force. Come fly with us. So I thought that was amazing. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world, get out of my small town at that time. I couldn't wait. So that's why I chose Navy.
And then when you saw those planes and you knew that flying was it, was there ever a deviation from that course? Because you go to MEPS, and for the audience, MEPS is just sort of the it's sort of the Costco. When you go to, you start finding everything that you need and don't need, and maybe you change your mind about stuff, but you get evaluated and do all your testing and everything else. So you go to MEPS, and you're like, I want to be an aviator, but you don't even know what that means. Small town girl from Minnesota, I want to be an aviator. Did you, are you going to fly? Well, I can't fly because of this or that, or I do want to fly, but this is the easier path. Give us an idea about your path, and did it deviate at all?
Right. So my initial take with that when I went, I got air crew on my contract, but I didn't know what that would mean as far as jobs. And being that I went right after high school, like 2 weeks after I graduated, I didn't go through any officer program, so I wasn't able to pilot anything because you have to have a 4-year degree and beyond that training to be a pilot. However, with air crew, they were taken enlisted, being part of the crew, and there's various jobs with that. And at the time, they offered me AW or AD, and I was like, okay, what is that? I have no idea what that is. AD, they were like, oh, it's mechanical, aircraft mechanic, and I'm not the least bit mechanically inclined at all. And so I was like, oh, well, I'll pick AW. They're like, oh, you do some computers in the air, and that's about all they could tell me. So I was pretty blind, but I just went with it.
And then what did EW turn out to be?
So AW actually is Aviation Warfare Systems Operator, or anti-submarine warfare. So we flew in the sky and detected submarines and blew them up when we needed to.
We have not had anybody who does this job before, and so I love talking about this particular work because the movies always depict submarines, and then there's you up above in a helicopter sometimes in an airplane, and you're out there hunting for submarines. If you get your fingers, you and your crew get your fingers into a submarine and you know where it is, what is the likelihood that they survive?
Well, if it's enemy, they're gone. We got this.
Right.
Now, thankfully, we haven't had any enemy per se submarines since the Cold War. But we're always watching them. We always have our eye on where the submarines are traveling. And if we had a submariner in here, they'd be like, oh, no, you guys don't know where you are.
Right.
It's the general battle back and forth. But we dropped sonobuoys into the water. And so what they are like big microphones that go down, and we would find that my job was the acoustic operator, so I would find them based on their sounds and the frequencies that they put out. So it was amazing what you could tell just by their sound frequencies that came up on the computer. And this is the kind of stuff that we had to learn. I had no idea this job even existed, like I said. But you can tell what country they're from, the direction they're going, how fast they're going, all from just the characteristics on this little frequency on your computer that you have to weed through all the other noises in the water. And then, then we also had the radar detectors that would find them via radar or magnetics or just different sources on the plane to find these guys.
Okay, so anytime you fly in an airplane, you guys have a lot of extra bonus training that you have to go through. So some of the training that the audience may not be aware of that we all kind of go through is there's chemical suit training, and you have to put your mask on and get gassed. And as you're being gassed, you take your mask off, so you realize, holy cow, my mask actually does work. It sucks out here without a mask on. Let me make sure I keep my mask on. And you've written about this on your blog and everything. But there's also SEER training, which is survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. And in that school, just for the audience's sake, is they can punch Julia in the face. They can do all kinds of they can snap your finger on accidentally on purpose. They really can push your mind and body a long way. And it's not to be. Heck, it's meant to be training so that when you are in a situation, and hopefully no one ever gets in one again, but when you are in a situation when you've been captured by the enemy, you've got some tools to defend yourself and also to protect your ability to live and survive. So talk about some of the additional schools that you've had to go to. Did you have to go through any rescue swimming specific training at all, or what did you have to do?
So I didn't do rescue swimmer. That was for the ones that went just a little bit. Well, their job focused more on the rescue swimmer. Those are the guys that went into the helicopters. I initially wanted to do that, but there weren't any female billets available at that time. So I was on P3s. I got P3 orders, which turned out to be pretty amazing because P3s are too big to go on a ship. So I was in the Navy for 5 years, and I never stepped foot on a ship, which is kind of funny.
Is a P3 a C-130 outfitted to do or counter submarine?
So it's a very similar plane. We have the same engines, except for they're flipped upside down. We always joke that their engines are upside down. But very similar in size and warfighting capabilities. Their propeller, 4-engine propeller, they fly real low and bank hard. They're just pretty an amazing aircraft, if I do say so. But so we had to do from boot camp, we did aircrew school, which is, just to see if we still had to do a lot of swimming quals and stuff because we're flying over water all the time. And then we had to do the technical training where we went and learned all these frequencies that I was speaking about and to learn the distinction between the different countries, the different submarines. I mean, so many different parameters in there. After that, that's when we went to SEER school that you spoke of, which I always say is the best, worst training I've ever had. Up in Rangeley, Maine in the wintertime.
That sounds so nice.
Yeah. It's funny because I later ended up being stationed in Brunswick, Maine, but during that time, I hated Maine. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the worst place in the world. But it truly is one of the most beautiful places, but my experience that time wasn't so beautiful.
No.
Yeah, we did get smacked around a lot, and it was broken into different phases, and I wrote about that quite a bit. My stories are kind of my experience going through it, which would be completely different from somebody else going through it. I was very young, didn't know a whole lot, and you're really learning a lot about yourself and how you'd handle situations. And of course, I always say it was just a taste of, what it can't even compare to what a real POW camp would be like. We knew it was going to end, and there was only so much that they could do to us.
Yeah.
We would have been extensively raped or,
sure,
broken in pieces, stuff that they can't even begin to train you on.
The reality makes the training seem goofy,
Yeah.
You can slap me in the face. Great, Actually,
right.
I'll tell you a story. So we were training up Iraqi officers to become source handlers, right, and doing spy stuff. And it's advanced techniques, and so we spent probably 3 weeks on talking about controlling a conversation and taking it to a direction you want to go so that the person gives you the information that you want. And at the end of the whole thing, and I'm working really hard, I'm really proud of what we've done in the interaction and the programs, then one of the guys says, but Mr. Beat, you know we will just hook up their balls to the battery. The battery is battery, right? Battery. And I'm like, oh my God. It's
Oh,
it's it's
yeah.
horrible, and there's no battery hooking up to anything in SEER school, and SEER school is physical and
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, you can't even imagine. I
Yeah.
mean, and I don't know. And so it put things in perspective a lot in so many different ways. Just that little week of training, I'll tell you what, because they mentally messed with you. They burned the Bible, they burned the flag, they did all these horrible things, just because this is the kind of stuff that they would do in front of you, to mess with you. And I'll tell you what, like after you're going through that, and in a way, after you've seen any third world country, anything like that, you don't take that flag for granted and what it
Right.
represents.
Yeah.
And I just feel like right now, at a time where everybody's kneeling for the national anthem and crap like that, like you wouldn't kneel if you saw what is really happening in other places. And I just feel like some of those, not to get political, but I'm
Yeah.
like, some of those players and stuff have no idea what's really going on out there, and how lucky they really are.
Yeah, this is an important thing, and it's not meant to be political. It's a social thing, and I completely understand, or at least I attempt to understand, what the kneeling during the national anthem is, and I've defended their right to do it. So that part I get, but yeah, look, we are really good at bashing the U.S. and what we all do, but if you've been somewhere else, try to get tacos at midnight. In any other nation in the world, and see how hard just that act is, and
Right.
I'm not trying to make light what people go through, but the U.S. isn't the best place. It isn't the worst, but God dang, it's really high on the list, and there are people, especially for women, you guys have it rough in most of the rest of the world, and not
Oh,
able to
yeah.
drive in countries that we trade with.
Yeah.
Homosexuality completely against the law. So yeah, when you I hate to say disrespect the flags, that's not what they're doing, but when you take a stance like that, understand, we're working from a better position than most of the rest of the world. So yeah. And someone like Julia sitting on an airplane trying to protect your right to do that, and she gets to say, "I don't like it when you kneel." You get to say that. You absolutely are right to say you need to get outside of the country and go see what hard looks like. And
Right.
boy,
And I mean, I understand what you're saying. Yes, freedom of press. That's what we're doing this for too. I get that.
Mhm.
And I understand the hardships. I see where they're coming from in that, and representing that. That's fine. I absolutely get that. I just don't. I feel like there's better ways to do it, to make your point, to help change the country and make it a better place without. I don't know. It's just.
well, I'm going to help you out and do a little picture painting for you. When you're at SEER school, one of the things they do is they rip reality away from you. They create their own reality, and they immerse you in that, and they try to make it as real as they can. And you're trying to hang on to reality. And one of your realities, it's the nation. It's home. And when they take that symbol of home that you're fighting for, and you're trying to find your touchstone, and they're burning it, that changes how you see some of these things. And those of us that have served, those of us that have look, I've been shot. I don't know if you guys have been shot at, but I've been shot at. And you think about home and why you're doing this, and you dig a little deeper on those hard days. And then when you see someone be less than respectful towards the military, and if you want to say that they're not protesting the military, that's fine. We're taking offense to it, and we get to. So when Julia says this, understand that when they're burning the flag in front of her, they're doing it because they've created this environment where they're ripping your country away from you, and she's trying her damnedest to stay home and safe and get home to her family, to her kids, your lovely kids that you can see. You guys should check out Julia Maki on her author's page. It's really simple. It's juliamaki.com. And if you're not sure if you're there, there's a big old red high heel next to her name. I wanted to ask you about that too. So obviously you're a female in a male-dominated world in the military. You're on a flight crew with a bunch of other dudes, and the red high heel shoe makes an appearance a couple of times. Why that symbol? What does that represent for you?
So when we did the cover, that's kind of where it's coming from. The cover of the book, it's all of us lined up in our flight suits, and we're at parade rest, and I have a pair of high heels behind me. And actually, just a fun fact with the cover of my book, what they don't teach you in Guerrero, our lineup, my husband's in it, his best friend Tate, who's mentioned in the book, and two of the other guys that I served with in BP in Brunswick. We all did this photo shoot, and my best friend Anna, who's the photographer, took the picture. And I love how she captured it. And then we superimposed the P-3 just because we couldn't time it just right with the P-3 flying over the top of us. But
yeah. And if you want to see what a C-130 with its engine on upside down or vice versa, you can look at the site there, and you'll get it if you know what the it really is upside down. It's hilarious.
It is the engines, but yeah. So it was her idea for the book to do it like that, and I was like, I love it because it captures the military side, the flight suits, serving. But then just kind of keeping a part of yourself. I mean, and I love high heels and I love the color red. So just keeping the femininity in a job where you're kind of, you're all uniformed and of the same, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I love that. But then, you're still inside there somewhere. So that's kind of what that represents.
Yeah. And a guy can kind of be inside by just being themselves on the outside part. But you're right, you're female. And if there's something that's not typically sexy, it's a bunch of people in flight suits. The occasional person can fill it out well, but it's got a different purpose. And so you get to, you get to be feminine in other ways. Or it's just like you said, it's always so. For the audience, parade rest is when you're standing with your legs about shoulder width apart, arms tucked neatly at the base of your spine, right above your pelvis. So you're standing there, and basically her high heels are in her hands behind her, because you wouldn't want to see that. What you're seeing is the person serving, but behind you kind of is who you are. So it's a funny thing. Talk a little bit about the writing process, because I struggle to actually grab the keys and put the 100,000 words down on paper. How did you get over the hump? What was it that said, Julia, you must write this book? Talk to us about that, because that's a big hurdle.
Well, so I've always enjoyed writing, and I feel like I express myself through words and writing so much better than I do verbally. However, it was when my youngest sister, decided to join the Navy as well. I wanted to tell her all the stories about and in boot camp this will happen, and in this school this will happen, and when you get out there, watch out for this. So that kind of kicked me in the butt and got the wheels turning about something that I'd always wanted to do. I wanted to just capture a lot of these moments, and that's what my book is. A lot of moments that just stood out, that were either funny, or most of them were there's something that I learned from that moment, or something that came out of that, and you kind of see how from the beginning to the end, how I've grown and changed like anybody in there, from 18 to 25 or whatever, or just in your young 20s, how you go through so much and change. And mine is just throwing in the military aspect of it all, and in this really different world. And I didn't really know exactly where to start. So for me, I just started in the middle. And I tell that to other people that are aspiring to write. I'm like, sometimes just start right in the middle. Like, if there's a story that you really want to capture, that comes to your mind, that you want to write that down so you don't forget, start writing that one. And then grab the next story that comes to you, and keep going. And eventually you'll go back and worry about putting in an order or not. Sometimes, good books or stories jump around a little bit. But you can work on the conceptual editing portion of that later. But just start writing. And it also helped me find my voice through blogging. When I say voice, I mean my style. My style of writing is a little bit different. Perhaps it's not, the traditional John Steinbeck or Charles Dickens, as I wrote on the back of the book. I'm more of a storyteller than an author. That's what I consider myself anyways.
Okay.
So I write like I speak, as if I was sitting there telling you a story in my own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just went with that, and it's almost like I needed permission to do that. Like that was okay to write like that. And I was actually kind of inspired by Elizabeth Gilbert's books. I felt that she did that with her journeys and the things that she learned along the way. So when I read that, I was like, maybe I could do that. So I started blogging different random stories, and I love writing funny stories because I'm a very awkward, clumsy person anyway.
Yeah.
That sticks my foot in my mouth a lot. And so then throw in all these, $1 million, $1 billion machines and all that, and I'm falling down the ladder, and I'm walking out in front of the radar, and all these other things when I'm trying to be taken seriously, but I'm still an awkward person. So
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that, because the being real is one thing. It's like one thing to come off slick and polished and the best version of you, but the real version of you sometimes is goofy, and you're like, you know what? That's as good as I got today. You got my best. That's what it was.
I know, yeah. And the other thing I learned too is that it's so easy to write the stories where you come off sounding like the hero, or this awesome thing happened, and I learned this and it was great. But the hard things were opening up and, being vulnerable and putting stuff out there that the world is going to read. And as soon as I released it, I always say, I feel like I'm standing naked in front of the world. Like, here I am. These are some of the mistakes I made and I'm not so proud of, and my kids are probably going to read someday. And I knew that, putting it out there, but it's like, okay, here I am, take it or leave it. You can judge me, but I already know the bad. So.
But it takes away the negative things and really gives it back to you in terms of a positive when you're able to take these mistakes. Because look, my first rule of conflict and instability is if you're not making mistakes, you're breaking the first rule. Like, you have to make mistakes to get to where you're going to get to. And the ability to own those and turn them into something that you can admit makes you someone who learns and improves. And heck, I want to be that person,
Right. And I think that's the human factor. That's what people relate to more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to read a book about, this was all perfect.
Yeah.
There's no conflict at all. Nobody reads that.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, we want to read about struggle and all the other things. So let's talk a little bit about, now you've written a couple of books, some children's books for sure, but let's talk specifically about what they don't teach you in Deer River. The book has some victories in it. Let's talk about one of those victory moments. Give us a little vignette.
Oh, goodness. Well, probably the first one was graduating aircrew school and having my dad pin my wings on me, because I really didn't know if that moment would happen, or, I envisioned it this whole time, but it took, a year and a half building up to that. And so that was a pretty huge moment. And, I should back up before that even. One of those moments, like, heck yeah, was the wall. So let me tell you about aircrew school. Aircrew is the physical training. It was 4 weeks. We would PT and physically train all morning long. We had runs, beach runs. This was down in Pensacola, Florida, which is a beautiful place, but so different from Minnesota, let me tell you. First time I saw the ocean, too. Yeah, we would do all the physical stuff, and then in the afternoon we would do all the water training. And I'm a pretty good swimmer, thankfully, coming from a land of 10,000 lakes. So that wasn't as hard for me. There were 3 of us women when that class first started, and at the end I was the only one left. And so I think everybody was kind of waiting for me to fall out too. If you don't pass a course of it, you just kind of fall back to the next class, and the next class you have a couple chances, and then after that, they'll redirect or look into your situation. But one of the hardest obstacles that we had was the obstacle course, where they had all these different obstacles, and it was like all set in the beach and the sand and all that. Like, if you've ever watched, well, they're in a lot of different military movies, but An Officer and a Gentleman, they they have the whole, which is like super old movie, but I'm dating myself. They have that whole obstacle course there that I felt like a lot of their training was similar to what we did.
Okay.
Except for the boxing part. We didn't do the boxing thing. But anyway, so there's this wall, and the dreaded wall. And it's a 6-foot wall, which doesn't seem super high, but there's like nothing to grab onto. It's just this slick wall, right? And so when you're like 5'3", 5'4", with not a lot of upper body strength, like the guys would just leap over it like little gazelles. But the wall was definitely my nemesis. Like I could not get over this wall, right? And you'd have to almost like jump as high as you can, pull yourself up, like get an arm over it, swing your legs over it, and then eventually get over it. So.
And then not break your leg on the way down. Because
right,
it's a good fall. Jump. And you're excited, and you're like, I've done it. I totally get that part of it, you know? Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, there's more to run still. But so
yeah.
The time when I made it over the wall, I felt like that was a huge victory, you know?
It is a huge victory.
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at P-3 Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show. It is.
And I could only do it when everybody was watching. Because when I went to go practice by myself and I didn't have people watching me, I for some reason, it didn't work. It was just that pressure. You can call it support, but I think it was pressure.
I think it was like that ham power, like, I need to perform.
Yeah, I'm being watched. I got to do this.
But you are being watched, and look, there's plenty of people that don't want you to make it, but I would guess, based on my experience, most everybody wants you to make it. And if you were allowed to in that situation, you know, the crew, like if you went out with your crew that you were with, there'd be no doubt you would be thrown over that wall. You know, like everybody would work together to get through the obstacles, because that's really how it works when you're out there working and flying and looking for submarines.
Oh, my crew, they were my brothers. I mean, I feel so fortunate to have had such a good crew. You know, we're a crew of 11 people, and there's, you know, three operators, 2 acoustic and then 2 radar, but then you also have the pilots, 3 pilots, and the navigator and tactical coordinator, and everybody's different positions. And like, you know, we travel to other countries, and it was just us at a time. And you're your family away from family. And like I said, and a lot of the stories, I felt like I had to write to honor them and what good leaders I had. And they were just, I don't know, just a great group of people. And I'm so thankful for that. Because, you know, it could go either way. You could end up with a couple tools on your crew, too.
Yeah. Well, and that does happen. I mean, you have to assimilate to the new person that comes in, and they hold some of that, but you guys also have to be welcoming and inclusive. I've been on teams where there's constantly churn. There's always someone new, and you're trying to figure out who they are, and you don't want to offend them, but you also want to be yourselves. And, you know, like, how many times do you see the thing like, hey, this is a no PC zone. Like, we just don't worry about that here. We're here to work, have fun, and, you know, take care of each other. And, you can definitely have a person that's like, yeah, I'm all about it. And you're like, oh, God, they're not about it.
All this.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And I went through some training just last drill, all this sexual harassment training, which is important and stuff. But it's gotten to almost the pendulum has swung so far the other side, as far as, like, I know there were a couple incidences that they were describing where people were getting written up for, and I'm like, oh my goodness, are you serious? Like, a guy called another guy, you know, a name because he was getting a slew shot, and oh, don't be a blah blah blah, and somebody just overheard that, and they're like, I'm gonna write you up for that. I'm like, oh crap, it wasn't even directed to them, you know, and just just stuff like that. It's like, oh, yep, we need to be more careful.
Well, that pendulum keeps swinging that direction, so I don't know if it's ever going to get to the top of its apex or if it's just going to just keep on flying. But yeah, because I remember when I was in, that stuff was
Right.
3 orders back from
I mean,
that.
Sometimes it was an extreme the other way. And I mean, it takes a lot to offend me. It has to be directed towards me, something like that. And it's very rare that I was actually in a bad situation like that, thankfully. There was one in particular, and I ended up punching the guy, and that's a story in the book.
Yes, I love it. I love it. You got one. Yeah. Here's how we're going to settle this. I'm about to punch you in the mouth.
Right. But that's how I got my call sign, too, so that worked out, I guess.
What's your call sign?
It was Knuckles at the time, which
Knuckles!
is
I love
cheesy, but it was a good story, I guess.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
But then there was another time where I had a joke played on me when I was working the front desk on duty, and I had made an announcement over the 1MC, and they asked me to call somebody down, and I did not get it. They said, there's a Michael, so Mike, and Hunt was his last name, and he needed to be called down, and I did not get it, and I made that announcement 3 times over the loudspeaker, and like, wow, I could have been written up for that probably, but...
Yeah, you got written. Yeah. That's hilarious. I wanted to say something about when you have to punch someone on your team or whatever. Oh, I know what it was. So this is one of my things, especially like if I'm in a position of leadership, and if someone has a complaint, they're always welcome to come to me or go above me and everything else. But when I go back to the person that did the offense, if you haven't directly talked to them, you're going to have a big problem with me. I'm going to be in your business because look, you owe that person the chance to say, "Gosh, I'm sorry. You caught me in a bad moment." Because when it gets too high, all of a sudden that person becomes the offense, and it's like, look, that's not them. They said something that it's a vernacular. It could be. It could be a very stupid slip of the tongue or something that's taken out of context. And if you don't address it, then great. And then you'd better give me a chance to address it, because you owe that to your immediate leader to handle that thing in-house. When you go out of house like that for things that aren't of that kind, you're a bad teammate. And that's I'm going to write you up for being a bad teammate.
No, I agree. I mean, you should always allow the person to correct the situation before you freak out and go above,
Yeah. I was told a long time ago I was using a term that was considered, I guess, offensive and passé, and I had no idea because you just can't keep up with all the terms and the way they evolve, and I'm glad to do my best to not offend. And not that I am a terribly PC person, but just, look, I don't want to be a jerk to people. And if this is the term now, then fine. I may not get it. I may mock it, especially if it doesn't make sense.
Right.
But, okay, I'll give you an example. When the whole thing about bathrooms came up, I don't care. If you want to go to the bathroom next to me, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't harm me. I don't think young girls and dudes should be going to bathroom, like teachers and gyms and all that kind of, that's a little more complicated. But if we all go to Denny's and you want to use the bathroom, hey, whatever, that's fine. But don't call it a unisex bathroom because that's the wrong fucking word. God damn it. I'm not gonna call it that. You want to call it omnisex or omnigender? Great. But uni? No, that's one gender, and it's dumb. That's like the exact opposite of what you're saying. So get it right, first of all.
Like a motto.
And then another thing that gets me crazy is we call folks from the eastern part of Asia Asians. And I'm like, but what about Russians? What about, what about people from Afghanistan? Like if you say Asian, you never think about that. So we took one term, Orientals, and said that's no good, that's racist and everything else. And then we just completely ignored a gigantic continent full of people because they don't fit into the thing. So I'm fine not saying, Oriental as a passe an offensive term. I'm glad to skip that, and I'm using it just in terms of color here. But what about all the other folks who wouldn't fall into the category that we're talking about? So
Right. No, it is confusing how it keeps changing. And I think the whole point is, okay, what is the intention behind this word?
Yeah.
What is somebody really trying to be hurtful by saying this word, or is it just, it's all in intention, I do believe.
yeah, yeah. How much venom is in this? If this is just, your grandpa saying, whatever, Japs, you're like, he gets to, that's his
Yeah.
era, and our demand on him to continue to evolve is unfair if you're not going to sit down and talk to the dude and understand who he is and where he comes from. That's just as bigoted and intolerant. So let's get away from all that stuff. Let's talk about some of the times in the book where, or just in your career when you've done something goofy for sure, where you're like, apart from the Mike Hunt thing, but is there anything else out there that's kind of silly?
Oh my gosh, well, that's what the whole book, I feel like, is made up of. But yeah, so I had this really big and gruff chief, and funny enough, he's actually from northern Minnesota as well. And he, the first time I met him, he's like, Mackie, huh? Well, I probably dated a few of your aunts, and I was saying that because Mackie's such a common name up in northern Minnesota, there's a lot of them. But he was the one that I felt like I was always on his shit list. Like I was always in trouble with him. One of the dumbest things that I did was after I had gotten my breakfast on a really, really early morning flight in Iceland. So everything's dark in Iceland in the wintertime. There's only about an hour of sunlight. We were walking out to start pre-flight in the plane. We had grabbed our food for the day and for the flight, I should say. And my sensor one, kind of my instructor, went ahead of me. So I was tagging along behind, not paying attention. And I walked out to the plane, and as I was coming around the side of it, I noticed that the strobe lights were on, flashing, which is a sign that the radar is being operated. And I should have been paying attention to that because there's a 250-foot standoff for that. And so I'm like, ooh, crap. And the funny thing is, I wasn't even scared of being radiated. I was more scared of being in trouble because I had broke the standoff for that. So I just started slowly backing up, hoping that nobody would really notice. Yeah. And all of a sudden the lights go off, the door opens, and my sensor 3, Stanley, he comes down the ladder, and he's like, Mackie, get over here. And he's like, Chief wants to talk to you. And I'm like, crap. So I sheepishly go up the stair or the ladder and into the galley where he was sitting doing his fuel weights and balances and stuff. And he's like, sit down. And so I sit, and he's like, just silent. And that is the worst thing. It felt like a little kid, like you feel like you're 5 years old again, in the military sometimes with leadership. But his words were, and I hope it's okay to say it, but he's like, do you want to fucking fry your ovaries? And I don't know how to really answer a question like that, like if it was just rhetorical, but I'm like, yeah. No, Chief. And so he's like, just sitting there quiet, and he's like, that's one. You only get 3 chances, and you're out of here. And so I just walked away. But yeah, that was a pretty rookie mistake there. And Stanley had shut the radar off, and obviously I have 3 kids, so all is well. Yeah.
But he's right, though. I mean, he's got to do his job and protect his I'll use the Army term. He has to protect his troops, and you, especially around that microwave, right? You and I both know, because it's really, for the audience, it's really bad to get in front of a microwave. It's really, really bad. If you get 3 shots, you really might only get 1. And if your head is not in the right place, you need something to correct it. And because look, what happens if it's something else, or if it's not a microwave thing? It's just like sergeant majors when you are on an Army post and everybody's going on patrols and they're working on vehicles. If you don't have your helmet on when you're supposed to, it's kind of like the brown M&M story for Van Halen. It's like if you don't pay attention to the rider and you put the brown M&Ms in there, then what else are you not doing right? And that's what these things are. Like that 50-foot standoff gives you a moment to figure it out and back away and correct. It's not like at 49 feet 9 inches you're dead.
Yeah.
But that's there for a reason, because we are doing things, and that's why the military does things so much slower. It's like, let's get this right, let's get this safe. We're going to drive 35 miles an hour for the next 15 hours. You're like, couldn't we just go 80? No.
It's the one place when you think about it where, 18 and 19-year-old men and women are operating these multi-billion-dollar tanks and aircraft and ship and, all these things that are, barely able to drive a car. And you're working around these, and, in your guys' case with guns and everything like that, rifles. So it's all like deadly stuff, you got to know what you're doing. And I think that was part of the evolution. You see in the beginning of the book, the stupid things that I was doing as a young airman. And then as it progresses, you kind of, you realize what you need to be doing. You step into more leadership roles. You're always vigilant. You're looking around, you just learn from these dumb things. But
you take care of each other in different ways.
It's a process.
For sure, it is a process. So talk to me a little bit about this. So, as someone who's going to go in Orion and fly around and look for submarines, you don't do that all the time. So when you guys are in garrison, I imagine you do some training and everything. But what do you guys do when you're not doing those things? You can't stay busy all the time looking for subs when there's not a war going on or a major exercise.
Right. Well, actually, so the P-3 is a multi-platform plane. They have, besides anti-submarine is their primary mission, but we also did all kinds of other stuff. They're patrol and reconnaissance type aircraft. So we did everything from search and rescue. Our squadron actually flew on when JFK.
I was going to ask.
Junior went down. We were the ones that were not my crew in particular, but our squadron went out there looking for pieces and anything that they could find. When, everything going on with Bosnia, Kosovo was going on, we were over there doing intel flights. What
does that mean? What do you guys, without breaking any kind of classification things, what do you guys look for? Because I'm doing intel and I'm on the ground talking to farmers, and I know you guys are doing intel, but tell me what you're doing.
So we're working with the ground troops as well. Kosovo is a little bit different, but they're also doing it in Iraq and Afghanistan as well. We would get targets that we're supposed to go find. We'd follow them up a river. We would either, depending on the day, if it was they were expecting conflict on a certain day, we would go and image that city square or wherever that particular location was. We would take video of it and send it back down to the troops on the ground, because we could fly, super, super high. Can't say how high, but and send back intel. The stuff that was going on at that time in Kosovo with Milosevic and stuff, we were looking for mass grave sites and stuff and sending that back. It's kind of almost the forgotten about stuff that was going on right before Iraq. But yeah, we were looking for some crazy stuff there. So there's all that. And then we did a lot of counter-narcotic operations in the Caribbean, where we were stationed out of Puerto Rico. We would fly on drug runners and find and detect people that were smuggling drugs out of South America and all those different locations, Central America. And we would find them and say, do a bunch of imaging on them and determine, okay, this is our bad guy. And we would call the Coast Guard and then on their ships, and they'd come and capture them. And often, this is always a fun story when I go talk to the schools. I'd say that we'd find these people and they would set their boats on fire because they would destroy all the evidence. But they knew that then if they jumped in, well, we're Americans, well, we have to rescue them. So they'd be good to go and they wouldn't have any evidence, unless we could prove it and find it and all this and that. But some of the stuff we did.
So you guys worked in Bosnia. Where did you fly out of? Did you fly out of Aviano, or where did you guys fly?
We were in Sigonella, Sicily. Actually, there was a good base right there in the Mediterranean for P3s. Yeah.
And that's not a bad assignment either. I mean, because
No.
look, you're up there in your fancy airplane living in Sigonella, and I'm actually in Bosnia living in the mud that never quits.
I know. People hated us. I mean, we went home.
I love you guys. I love you guys. You're smart enough to get that job.
Yeah. And had lots of spaghetti.
Lots of spaghetti. Do you get a combat patch for that tour or no?
Oh yeah. It was combat. I mean, we were shot at, small arm fire, nothing major or anything, but
counts. Yeah.
Stuff like that, but
yeah. Bullets go through planes. You could be sitting in the wrong seat at the wrong time, and crazy things happen.
I mean, it wasn't anything worrisome. We were high up and stuff like that. I played a combat aircrew role, but I can't really call myself a combat veteran at all because it's nothing like the ground troops and the stuff that they did, and we weren't in a war zone per se or anything like that. So
yeah,
different.
Well, let me take that from you though, and disagree completely because you're serving the mission on the ground. Those people down there, if you're helping keeping them safe, and you're flying overhead, if you're briefed, look, and they brief P3s as a guy on the ground, they stack all the air assets up in that slide that we all see, and there's a Raven, and there's a Kiowa, and there's a P3, and there's an AWACS, and all those things count. If they're briefing you in the rooms where I am, you're in a combat zone. I don't care. It doesn't matter. So. I understand your trepidation in saying I'm a combat veteran, but I'll validate it for you because we couldn't do that job without you, or if we did, we'd be in a whole lot more peril, and we certainly don't need any more of that. So, it does count, and what you've done is fantastic. I love that you've written your story, juliamaki.com. For those of you guys who want to buy the book, that's the best place to support her. Of course, you can find it on Amazon, but she makes a little bit more money for her work if you go to her website. And she's got these great kid books that we're not going to have time to cover. But look, she's a nice person, as you can tell from listening to her. She's a mom, she's a wife, and she's just as all American as all get out. So when I ask you guys to support these authors, it's because I really believe in what they're doing, and I think you'll find value whether you're a dude or a lady, and their stories are incredible. Tactical 16 does great work. They work hard to make sure that us veterans who manage to get a book together get the most possible money, because there's a lot of people that try to take advantage of us. And so if no one else has told you today, thank you for being who you are and for raising great kids. And I really appreciate your time, and thanks for hanging out with me, Julia.
Oh gosh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I've enjoyed listening to all your other interviews, and I've enjoyed chatting with you as well. So I appreciate all what you're doing to support us. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Do you got any questions for me at all, or anything else you want to cover?
Well, I need to read up more and listen to more of your story. I get like little pieces here and there of your story. So when are you going to write your story?
I think here's my plan. My plan is to grab my microphone, because I know I can record hours of content, and I'm going to try to talk it out and then publish it as an audiobook first, and see if the book has demands to be printed. Because that's a whole different thing. So that's my approach.
That's
it's atypical.
A great idea. I'm sorry. Like, I know so many people don't have time to read books anymore. And I've had so many people ask me, do you have an audio version of this? I'm like, not right now. Maybe in the future.
Yeah.
But people love audiobooks right now.
Yeah, well, they're a thing, and you can sit in traffic and listen to the same old boring songs that you've heard 1,000 times, or literally like 30 minutes of content in an hour on the radio, or you can put on a podcast or an audiobook and actually get a full hour's worth of, do something with your time, not just, not that there's anything wrong with listening to any music, but I want to hear music, not commercials, not, someone giving me the news and weather. Like, the traffic, I know it sucks. I'm in it.
Right.
So. All right, awesome. Hey, thank you so much for coming on, everybody. Julia Maki, juliamaki.com. Definitely go support her. Buy her book and give it to a friend if you don't want to read it, because that's how you support veterans, is by getting out there and we create stuff, supporting us. You can always get a hold of me at paturner.com. You can get a hold of John at johnlg69. On Twitter as well, and then you can also get a hold of us at Break It Down Show all over the place. We're going to talk to more of the Tactical 16 authors. I'm positive we'll talk to Julia again at some point. And just again, if I haven't said it already, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for having me on the Break It Down Show.